So, Kim, you mentioned Bruce McLean, who was your predecessor at Aiken Gump, and I know Bruce, and he's one of the I would say iconic, was one of in his day one of the iconic leaders of a U.S. law firm, a real visionary. So what was it like stepping into that? Bruce had done it a long time.
20 years.
20 years. So
right.
how did you manage that transition?
Right. Well, I start by saying you have a similar spot that you're in, because Warren Gorell was also a legend. And I think if the question is what happens to people after they're icons in this field, I think I can tell you that the two of them are biking presently in the French Alps.
They're in good shape. Yeah.
So, that's the path. It was very challenging. Now, I was very fortunate because Bruce, for probably 5+ years, spent a lot of time mentoring and developing my knowledge of the firm, my leadership skills, giving me visibility. So it was a more gradual transition than I think I even appreciated at the time. I thought that Bruce was just nicely asking me to report to the partners on a particular topic on a firm-wide video conference. Now I realize that there was a method to many of these steps. We've only had 4 chairs of our law firm in the whole history of the firm, the first being Bob Strauss and the second being Alan Feld. So Bruce is, for many people, that is their experience in what it was to be at Aiken Gump, including for me. So he was the chair when I started at the firm in 1994, and that is all I ever knew. And he ran a pretty fantastic law firm. So there was a lot that made me hesitant to do anything differently, because he was really good, and the firm was highly supportive of him, and he moved us pretty radically from where we started to where we were in 2013 when I took on this role. So you're trying to kind of find the balance when you follow an icon of, let's not do anything that's going to upset what is in very good shape, but what is it that I can bring that would be something that would add value to the firm, or a different perspective, a different way of looking at things. And I think it's been a nice way of growing many of the things that Bruce did further, and getting them even to take more root and bloom into some great aspects of the firm, and then find some ways in which we moved in a different direction. I mean, I think the biggest change in our firm from the end of when Bruce was in this role and when I took over was what we did in London, Hong Kong, and Frankfurt. And bringing in the group that we did from Bingham was a pretty transformational change for us. That gave me some opportunities for a somewhat different focus than Bruce. I mean, we've both been very focused on global expansion. You guys have done that, I think, unbelievably well. And that was a nice way in which the direction of the firm continued, with the roots that were in place, but we were able to move to even greater heights. And you?
Well, it was a little bit different in the sense that I wasn't just succeeding Warren. So when I took over, we moved from having 2 co-CEOs, Warren in Washington and David Harris in London, to a single. And so in a way, it was easier in the sense that nobody had the job before. And I pretty much took it on that basis, that the assignment was to take on a new role and to decide how that role would play out. One of the results of that is I have made the decision to spend about 3 months a year in London. So I'm in the office there. It is our single biggest office in the world. So wanted to know the lawyers there, meet them, and be clear that I was going to be the CEO for everybody, not just for Washington, D.C. or New York. And so that was an advantage. I think you just have got to find your voice, who you are. And when you come along a very successful, you're replacing somebody who's very successful, like Bruce or Warren, I think you can either be paralyzed by that, or you just simply say, I've been put in this role, and I'm just going to do it the best I can until they tell me to stop. And so that's been the mindset I've brought to it. You know, I came to this at a different point in my career than probably is typical. And that in itself has been somewhat liberating. I'm not going to do this for 10 years. I'm not going to do this for 20 years like Warren or Bruce did. I've got a really, in my mind, an opportunity here over a relatively short span to finish the integration of our combination and to really get us ready for the next 10 years beyond that. And that, in a way, means a lot more focus and a lot more sense of urgency that has been useful, because I think when you do a job like this, a sense of urgency is probably a necessary attribute.
Right, and I think just in terms of defining and finding your voice, I think one of the things I said to Bruce when he checks in periodically, or I give him a call when I have an issue that I could use his wisdom. So he says, you know, how's it going? And I said, you know, the biggest change is that for the last 5+ years, whenever either one of us had something that, you know, we were kind of thinking through, you could call the other person and bounce off what your thoughts were and always know that you were going to get a good response. And now I just talk to myself and stare out the window and say, what would Bruce say? And have the conversation with myself. So it was a great kind of path to get to where you are, that you're now leading and deciding on what the messages are and what you want to focus on. But it is it's a daunting challenge coming after someone that's so defined both of our firms.
That's true. Warren has stayed on as CEO Emeritus. He initially focused on his practice and now has completely transitioned out of that. And that has been a huge help, although he's never called me once. I mean, his point of view is, I'm here. So you call me if there's something you'd like me to do.
Yeah.
I'm here ready to do it, but has never once sort of called me up and said, why did you do that?
Same
and
here.
That, I think, is
sign of a good leader.
Yeah, exactly. That they're prepared to let you kind of succeed or fail on your own. But much to be learned.
Yes, indeed. So let's talk a little bit about, I think, a topic that both of us care a lot about at our firms, which is the culture. I think culture means a lot of different things. It comes up in almost every aspect of the firm. But why don't you talk a little bit about how you define culture and what that means at Hogan?
Sure. Well, I do think it is one of those things, like everybody talks about it, but what does it really mean? I think for me, it's kind of what are the norms of behavior that you expect of one another, and that you're prepared to call somebody out on if they disregard. And for us, it's been an interesting experience as we've brought together people from so many different cultures on a relatively even footing. So not a U.S. firm that is doing something, but a global firm that has to accommodate those different people, different outlooks, and so I think it begins with what are your shared ambitions? How are you going to talk about your ambitions? How are you going to take care of each other? I mean, I think for us, a critical aspect of our culture is actually supporting one another. And so one of the things that allowed us to be successful bringing together this diverse group was the various antecedents all had a culture of respect, of the way you communicated with one another, and out of that grew a pretty good facility at building relationships. So I think at the end of the day, relationships are what allow a professional services firm to succeed, or if the relationships are not fostered, it will fail. So there are those aspects. I think one of the things that I struggle with at times, and what we sort of are working on, is making sure our culture has the right commitment to feedback. I find it fascinating about lawyers. They are very adversarial often in their professional dealings, But if you say, go down the hall and have a conversation with a partner that did not do what you expected them to do, or an associate, and they do not want to do that. And so really trying to develop a culture where feedback gets given, at the right time in the right way, and that can allow you to actually get better. And that's something we talk a lot about, is having a culture of straight talk and feedback that allows us to not avoid problems. Because sometimes your culture of collegiality can allow you to duck the issues that need to be addressed. And I do think that's one of the things that, the partnership as a whole, they're looking at for management and saying, are you going to take on the things that are hard? You say that you're about collaboration, but do you reward the people who don't collaborate? And there are all these ways that I think a culture both gets talked about and lived. The closer those are, the better you're going to be, as an organization. But I do find this is a time where culture is more important than ever, because there's so many forces, pushing at it, whether it's technology or the market or everything else. And I find it pretty fascinating. I think we're like, as business organizations, a collection of 2,500 lawyers is a pretty fascinating organism. Yeah, plus another couple thousand other people that are there to help the lawyers do what they do.
Right, and I heard someone speak and say, culture should never be its own point, because culture should actually be embedded in every single thing that you're doing as a law firm. And it did resonate with me that culture isn't per se its own goal. Culture is in who you decide to bring in laterally, how your associates feel about coming to work every day. How do all of the people that support all of the lawyers and make this whole engine run and make us look good with our clients, how do they feel about their experience at work? How do our clients view us, right? Because culture, they see culture in how the lawyers at all of the different law firms who do work for them, how they interact with each other and how they interact with clients. Those all are aspects of our own culture. And I guess when I've tried to kind of distill this into all of the places that I see culture mattering, I've tried to come up with the best balance of, this is a high-performing law firm. It's a firm that I think people are deeply committed to the firm's goals and to making sure that our clients view us as being the place to turn. But it's also a firm where the other part of my message is, we are investing for the next generation of lawyers so that we leave the firm a better firm than we found it when we started our legal careers here. And that has resonated. That is a concept that our partners have said, I like that goal. I like the idea that we're all driving for success, but we're also making sure that the glue is there, the connections are there, the sense of common purpose is there, the desire to have a firm that is even stronger and doing even more wonderful things. When I finish doing that, it's a pretty satisfying and compelling way to describe what kind of a culture we want to have. So it's been, I think it's been a good message for us to keep the balance. You want everyone that works there to feel intensely committed, but it is a community, and that community and that sense of how we treat each other and respect, I think that matters a lot to how a firm fares in all aspects, in talent and in relationships with our clients. So
no, I think that's the kind of the secret, is how do you get the balance right between ambition, which is critically important, and the supportiveness. And then the other thing that we see today is the need to be innovative, to be creative.
Absolutely.
And building that in your culture is also, boy, what a challenge to make lawyers, to challenge lawyers to be innovative. Yeah, we are not something I heard for the first 25 years of practicing law, but it's definitely part of our reality.